Innovation and experimentation is ISB's DNA. We always want to push boundaries. We always want to make sure our students get something a little extra in the class. The competitive strategy course introduced 4 VR case studies in addition to the normal case studies that the students do. As a teacher, Professor Anand Nandkumar wanted to push the boundaries and make sure the students leave the classroom with something extra, understand contexts in a different way than they've always done. And as a practice of learning, we hope that the students have taken back something that they've never experienced before and always keep this in mind as they become future managers. So Anand, we wanted to talk about the competitive strategy course and the fact that you used 4 VR case studies in the course. How did you come up with this idea of using VR case studies?
So, as a community of teachers, we often exchange ideas. So, I heard about a VR experiment that some of the faculty members at a different school were actually trying to imbibe in their courses. So, a lot of times in the classroom, when we try to describe a phenomena or teach them a certain set of tools and techniques, the concepts become very abstract for 2 reasons. One is we don't link it well enough to the context, and 2, people are always struggling to find real world examples. So I think VR essentially fulfills both of these roles, but the additional 4th dimension that it adds to, right? So you could imagine a classroom in which the instructor provides examples, but the additional element it adds beyond all these examples is for students to critically think about, how do I come up with a strategy, or how do I formulate a strategy that is also coherent with the environment?
Anand, how does a VR case study help to contextualize the understanding of strategy?
So this idea of trying to ask for information is something that we are probably imbibes in students. Sometimes, all of us, most managers are under time pressure. There are obviously time compression diseconomies. When you force managers to make decisions, very soon they don't seek information, and there's a lot of work on psychology that essentially talks about this. They don't seek information, they use their intuition, but then the question is, where does intuition come from? Intuition comes from experience, but then several managers are dealing with contexts in which they don't have prior experience, so they tend to extrapolate from their respective experiences. They don't seek information, they simply extrapolate. Maybe what this might do is, it's still early days, but maybe what it might do is essentially get them to pause for a little bit and actually seek for more information, seek more contextual information to see what they are essentially trying to formulate or what they're trying to solve are in fact the right problems to solve, and also the fact that they've solved it maybe the right way, which is in congruence with the context or the contextual intelligence that they have.
I think it's a great alternate for not being able to be there physically, because if not for this, as a marketer who works in the technology space, there is no way I would find myself inside a warehouse. So I think this was a great alternate for someone like me who would have never been in like a supply chain or logistics space.
So, Professor, did the quality of discussion improve in class after using VR case studies?
So the quality of discussions greatly improved in the class simply because of the contextual intelligence that VR provided. A lot of times when we discuss cases and the penny drops, the students understand why something is being done. I mean, they don't think critically in the following sense. They don't think about why not something else. So remember, the idea, especially for a strategist, is to generate options and then subsequently narrow down on a bunch of options, that one of which is eventually formulated as a strategy. BR essentially helps students to think about several alternatives that they could think about. And in some cases, some of the students even came up with alternatives that were, in my opinion, better than what the companies themselves had implemented. So I think VR helps you hit that nice balance between theory and its application to a context. And it also teaches students to essentially go to the field, look at problems. So there are different ways by which students learn, our managers even learn. Sometimes it's about asking your colleagues. Sometimes it's about going and taking a look by yourself in an environment. For example, we taught, in this class, we had discussed a case on Africa, right? And some of the students, or most of them, hadn't even been to Africa. And there was this popular misconception that most of Africa is very poor. But when we showed them certain affluent parts of Kenya, the penny dropped, saying that, oh, you know what, Africa is very heterogeneous, and some parts of Africa might even be a little more affluent than our context itself. So that kind of contextual intelligence helps them to design strategies for their companies, right? And remember, as managers, typically what ends up happening is people typically find themselves in unfamiliar contexts in which they are supposed to strategize for a context that they've never even seen in their past. So this is in some ways a very good training ground for people to go into the field, understand what's happening, and then thinking about what are the relevant problems for a company to solve in terms of formulating a strategy.
Between a VR experience and a 2D video, what is the extra edge that the former brings?
So the extra thing that the VR experience essentially brings in is what typically happens in the real world, right? Those kinds of discussions may not happen in a video because, you have like one single camera that is focusing on a set of things. There isn't this power to observe multiple things that are going on, which means that the discussion, in some ways, the storyteller or the person who's holding the camera has already figured out what is the story that needs to be narrated to the students. Whereas with VR, it's not the case. People see what they want to see, and people then can come back to their respective discussion tables and then think about what are the problems that are even worth solving.
These case studies that we do as part of our curriculum, so normally we would watch videos, but like I said, this is the first time we used VR headsets. The thing I like is, it was very immersive. We got a 360-degree view of the entire case or the short stories that were being presented in these videos. So for example, if we have the daily life of an Amazon delivery person and the in-store experience inside Maruti store, that is, I think, there it was quite compelling, because in a 360-degree experience can choose where I want to pay more attention to, where I want to pay less attention to, as opposed to a 2D video. Your attention is being directed to certain subjects, certain elements inside the video. So it was very good.
So seeing a 2D video, okay, I could see from an outsider point of view, but I felt I was standing there seeing there's a lot of empty space. So that's why I could sense, okay, there's much more which can be done in the warehousing. And I will remember this video for many years, because it was like a first-hand experience of being there.
The real aspect of it was more exciting. I think this I enjoyed more because this took me to the place and was narrating the story. It's like reading a storybook and while you are in the world of the story.
Why did you decide that the VR cases should be synchronous in-class experiences?
So I wanted the memory of those videos to be very fresh. And this is the reason why I made it a synchronous experience. Because if these memories from whatever they have seen are fresh, what I wanted to do in the classroom is to link the theory with what they have seen and then embellish numbers from the financial statements that is coherent with what they have seen, as well as what the company strategy was, or the context themselves, did bear out to them. Right? This is what I wanted to do. If I had, for example, did it in in a lab kind of setting outside the classroom in asynchronous mode, it would have simply been a tool for them to come prepared to the classroom for them to sort of answer a few questions that I might have wanted them to answer. But it wouldn't have been sort of this ability to pull in different aspects. For example, what they saw is what the numbers were showing them as well. And what they saw sometimes was not in sync with the strategy that the companies themselves had formulated. It was very nice. I mean, the synchronous experience was handy for me to point out these incoherences. And it enabled me as a strategy professor to tell the students that coherence is the hardest thing for companies to achieve when they are formulating their respective strategies.
When the experience was given to us in the class, it was completely transformative in nature, right? It helped us understand the case studies that is written on a pen and paper, to actually go to the centers, visit the case in a real world situation in a very 3D manner, and it was just an amazing experience from that point of view.
Anand, how do you think the VR cases contributed to knowledge transfer?
There was more of an appreciation for something that is as abstract as strategy is. People now understand how crucial it is for companies to formulate strategy, and how managers can themselves go about seeking information in a relatively unstructured world. So maybe structuring. The second thing which I think they took away was simply this idea of how do you use your observation and then distill them into numbers, which is ultimately what managers are held accountable for, whether we like it or not. So this is something that they were excited about. They came and told me that these were the skills that stood out for them. And then a lot of them came and told me that if we hadn't had this experience, we would have probably decided very differently. So in that sense, I think VR adds a lot more to the ability of students to think critically, which I think is probably is a vital skill for managers going forward.
So the use of VR supplements in the course has transformed the way we approach learning. And I believe these innovative methods are helping us becoming better managers in the rapidly changing environment.
You can experience how it feels to be in the place. So I've heard a lot of times that there are go-downs, that you have these places where a lot of activity happens behind the scenes before the delivery, but actually seeing how it comes to life and knowing that it's a very small setup where such large things are happening felt really overwhelming. In fact, sitting in class and experiencing the same thing felt like a better experience, because we could discuss it immediately, and at the same time the professor was also giving us a brief of what was happening.
As always, ISB is at the forefront of bringing us great new trends, new technology and state-of-the-art facilities. So thanks to ISB and thanks Professor Anand.